The valley below us was inhabited by Red Indians, and strange, rugged-featured men they were too, who gave their name to the river below us, the Great Blackfoot. Hundreds of battles between the Indians and the white men were fought in the surrounding countryside, and I'd often heard talk in the camps about Little Bighorn and Custer's defeat by Crazy Horse. The whole Nez Perce War had taken place some years earlier. Much of the fighting was down by the Bitterroot River, and that wasn't very far away from us. The Indians that were left here were in a bad way, and we had a great deal of pity for them. We knew their plight well, struggling to hold on to the land of their ancestors, with greedy white men trying to get their hands on it.
The Blackfeet people at the time that Mickey McGowan encountered them were going through a time of dreadful transition. The older order was breaking down. Their primary source of food, the buffalo, had vanished for all practical purposes. They were being settled in reservation communities, being oppressed by government agents.
Their squaws would come down to our cabins leading mules holding 5 or 6 children fitted snugly in panniers. They'd walk from cabin to cabin, and every bit of waste food we'd have thrown out, pieces of bread, discarded meat, they'd gather and take back with them down the valley.
They were trapped between their immediate old way of life and the uncertainty of a new way of life that we know, looking back from a distance 100 years later, has been a continual struggle. And so he was seeing a people that were going into a long decline, that even now, are struggling to regain some of their cultural and spiritual heights and integrity.
There was neither peace nor comfort for them anywhere. They'd come to a little valley pushed from their traditional lands by the settlers. They'd build their houses and start to work on the rough ground until they'd turn it into a fine, rich field stretching as far as the eye can see. Then the army would drive these poor people further into the remotest reaches of the hills. Often the soldiers had to fight a hard battle before the Indians would be finally defeated and routed. They'd hold out bravely, trying to keep their land and their way of life. But in the end, the white man's superiority of numbers and weapons would tell, and they'd suffer defeat. We were also interfering with them, I suppose, as well as everybody else, but at least some of us sensed that if they were bitter, it was not without cause.
That's the paradox of Mickey McGowan's narrative. On one hand, he's very empathetic. He's coming from a place of sorrow, of trial, of oppression, of colonialism. And he brings that baggage, obviously, of course, with him across the waters to Montana here and wherever else he traveled. So he can look through those eyes at the people here and be very empathetic. Yet, on the other hand, he was part of the larger society. He had no compunction, in other words, it didn't seem to me, no real second thoughts about about going ahead and being the oppressor as well.
A man from Cloughanile, one of the O'Donnells, was out there at the same time as myself, and he had a fine, comely wife with him. They hadn't been very long in the place and didn't give any thought to the danger. He went off to the mines one day, leaving her behind in the cabin. group of Blackfoot braves laid eyes on her and bore her off down the valley. When the man returned in the evening, there was neither hide nor hair of his wife. The poor man was nearly out of his mind. It was clear to the old hands that the red men had kidnapped her. The anger of the miners mounted, and they gathered with their guns and set off down the valley to look for her. They intended to wreak havoc and desolation on the Indians. As they came to the Indian camp, they saw the lost woman sitting dazed among a crowd. As soon as the Indians saw us coming towards them armed to the teeth, off they made like rabbits, leaving her behind. I was one of the band that rescued that poor woman, and I didn't care whether I was shot, so long as we got her away from those red devils.